The response is always something like, well, if it was just one of these, then okay, maybe it's not worth having this theory, but it's like all of these and they work together. Again, except where they don't. The fact that you can build the picture mostly coherent doesn't mean it's coherent. It's mostly coherent. That means we have problems, okay?
Any good books for discussing the supplementarian theory as opposed to JEDP?
Oh gosh, not in this century. The only things that I can think of are critiques of JEDP. They're not necessarily supplementarian. I mean, one of the oldest is Cassuto's, Umberto Cassuto, his critique of the documentary hypothesis. More recently, Dwayne Garrett has a book called Rethinking Genesis. It just focuses on Genesis, so it's not JEDP, but it tackles the source critical assumptions, things like that. So those two, out of the gate. You have to realize, even within people, and this is the dominant view, people who accept JEDP, they fight a lot intramurally on whether there really are four sources. Some people deny that E is a legitimate source because you don't get, it's just spotty. You don't get a whole narrative from it if you just look at what's supposed to be E. In grad school, we would get spanked if we used JEDP. It's JEPD. Okay. Because there's an issue of the chronology of the sources. Okay. And so that's a fight. So is E a source? Is the order of the source? Is one borrowing from the other? I mean, okay, I wish we were off camera here. Yeah, I'm just gonna tell you a little anecdote here. And I'm not gonna name the professor, but when I was in grad school, one of the courses we had was a seminar on the Pentateuch, okay? And this is what we did. It was all JEDP stuff. And what we did is, he actually had us read, and I think this was good, Richard Elliott Friedman's book, Who Wrote the Bible? It's a popularization of JEDP. It sold over 2 million copies. I mean, it still sells. Because, again, it was written for a popular audience, and he's, most scholars can't write to save their lives. It's just full of academic jargon and stuff, but this guy can. And so this was a wild, New York Times bestseller, and it's just a popularization of JEDP. So it's really worth reading even for grad students because it's a nice, readable presentation, okay? So we're going through this thing, and you go through the standard source arguments, differences between the names of God and the sources. Over here, it's predominantly Elohim, and here it's Yahweh. You've got different vocabulary words that are supposed to be in J, but not in E, and vice versa. There's half a dozen, 6, 7, 8, or whatever they are, criteria. And so one day in graduate school, again, I probably should have, well, no, I didn't get mistreated for this, although I could have. I wasn't thinking at the time. I said, I've been wondering about this, the divine name criterion. Isn't it true that if we look at the Septuagint, the divine names aren't the same as in the Masoretic text about 110, 120 times? So if they're reversed, doesn't that mess up the divine name criterion? Since I said it, I probably should have said, doesn't that just destroy the divine name criterion? Because if it's this neat picture, one source uses one, the other source uses the other, except where they don't 120 times in the text of the Septuagint, okay? And my professor looked at me and said, yeah, that's true. And I said, well, what do we do with that? He goes, the translator was just sloppy. That was his answer. This is a PhD class. Translator was just sloppy. I thought, well, with the divine name, okay? I went away thinking of that, well, I just added another reason I ain't buying this, okay? I'm not buying what you're selling here. All of the criteria have outliers like that. It looks beautiful except where it doesn't. And the response is always something like, well, if it was just one of these, then okay, maybe it's not worth having this theory. But it's like all of these, and they work together. And again, except where they don't. The fact that you can build the picture mostly coherent doesn't mean it's coherent. It's mostly coherent. That means we have problems, okay? And it's not satisfactory to say that the translator was just sloppy. Honestly, it's a self-serving answer. But I'm not going to win that battle in grad school. So.